The last thing that I definitely wanted to talk to you about is one of the things that Trump brought up recently is the JFK case.
Oh, yeah.
And releasing some of the files, and they wanted to redact the information that pertained to the people that were still alive. Now, I want to know what I don't know what you could say, but what do you think about the JFK case? Do you think that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone?
I can see of all the sort of incidents, of all the, I don't mean to minimize it by calling it an incident, but of all those situations, the Kennedy assassination and MLK and Martin Luther King's assassination, those are the two that I understand more than anything else why they've lingered and why people don't believe the shit that they've seen and why they have concerns about it. Martin Luther King more than Kennedy, I believe that there was something there that we still don't understand in terms of who else was responsible and who organized that and who assisted in that, right? I just think of those two, that's the one I've got bigger questions on. The Kennedy assassination, I think that Oswald pulled the trigger. I think in his mind, the reason he was doing it was for the greater good of communism and to boost his image with the Soviets and with the Cuban regime. Do I think that he had assistance? I don't think so, but I could be swayed from that with better evidence than I've seen. But I understand why people are so dug in on it. Right, because I mean, look, it was a massive event, right? It was a massive event. But Oswald had sufficient training. You did not have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. It was a different era, and we don't understand it in today's terms. But when you get right in that position and look out that window and look at the shot that was taken, and what was involved in that, I was not you've shot. This sounds terrible, but anybody who's hunted, has taken a more difficult shot than that.
Yeah.
So that part of it and his motivation and his past ties to the Soviets, do I think the Soviets were pulling the trigger on it? Do I think the Mafia were pulling the trigger? I haven't seen anything that convinces me that was the case. I think that Oswald felt like he was doing it for them or he was going to prove himself in that regard. But again, I understand why people are dug in. The MLK one, Martin Luther King, I just I think that I don't think he acted alone.
What makes you think that?
I think that, look, he was a loser, a two-bit criminal, right, who was constantly getting picked up for the shit that he was doing and ending up in jail, right? He was a mess, right? There was nothing clever about him. And then leading up to the assassination, he cleaned up, right, his act. Suddenly he went from looking like a two-bit, criminal, to a college professor, basically. And he had cash. He was able to, purchase a vehicle. And he kind of went off the grid for a while. He went on this drive, right, and sort of stayed off the grid. And he behaved in a way that he hadn't up until, months before this thing took place. And then he ended up in Europe, and I just something tells me that he had assistance in some fashion. I don't know who, right, or whatever, but that's the one that more than any others that I've looked at, makes me step back and go, no, we don't know the whole story here. The Kennedy thing, again, maybe there's something out there that we just haven't turned over. That's always a possibility, but MLK, I think that's the one that's most disturbing. That's
interesting. I don't know enough about the MLK murder. I need to go look into that now, especially if you think that something was going on.
Look at his behavior.
What the hell was his name again? James Earl Ray.
James Earl Ray. And I've talked to his brother. I've interviewed his brother.
For what?
For a show, a series where we did a kind of investigative look into this. There's if all you do when you're looking at this is to look at Ray's behavior in that year leading up to the assassination, that's the interesting for me. That's the most interesting part. I mean, you put it in context with everything he did up until that point, which was he was basically, again, just a two-bit criminal who couldn't stay out of jail. And then you get this, and you get this change in behavior and this change in appearance and this sudden ability to be something that he wasn't up until that point. I guess everybody can change, but that was the most striking part for me.
There's no obvious source of income.
No, just a penny ante criminal basically. And there was plenty of information. It wasn't like he couldn't have gathered. If you say, well, no, he acted on his own. Well, okay, yeah. Was there information? Yes, leading right up to the day before. There was talk about, there were news reports showing King at the Lorraine Motel, and coming in and out of the room, that he was staying in. And so it wasn't as if you couldn't gather that information on your own, but it was that behavior leading up to it. And I'm not a conspiracy guy at all, right? I've seen too much shit to think that every conspiracy is holding water. So, but this one was disturbing in that regard, for what that's worth.
All right, I'm going to look into it now.
Yeah, you should look into it, and we'll talk about it next time. See what you think, because I'd really be interested. I don't think we're going to this show that we're going to get ready to do here, start filming in next month is not going to be looking into things like that.
What is it called?
It's going to be called Black Files. They may change the number the name just before we go on the air, but I really enjoyed the shows that I did in the past. America Declassified, with they're looking into conspiracies. I really enjoyed it. Right, I really, really thought it was fascinating, and I get why people feel that way.
Yeah,
Kennedy for sure,
especially when they're on the outside. The Kennedy one, to me, the bullet is the most disturbing thing.
Yeah,
that bullet that just showed up on Connolly's gurney. Oh, look what we found.
Yeah, we found this bullet. Yeah,
yeah, and it's not distorted, and supposedly went through two people and shattered bone.
The magic bullet. Yeah,
it's just, I don't buy it. I don't think that bullet came from there.
That's probably the most, of all things, because we looked at the grassy knoll issue and the possibility of spotting other people from the other side. Yeah.
The fuck out of here with that bullet.
Yeah.
That bullet drives me crazy. Not only that, there's more pieces of the bullet fragments in Connolly's body. When you look at the X-rays of Connolly's body that show bullet fragments, there's little pieces. Yeah. They found little tiny pieces of metal in his body from the bullet fragments. Yeah. But you don't see that missing from the bullet. It's bullshit.
Yeah, the bullet thing is, and again, there's elements of it that you look at, but collectively, and again, maybe there's something else out there. Maybe there is, and we just haven't uncovered it, or maybe this will, prompt, some additional information. Who knows? But anyway, it's fascinating shit. But I do get it, because it was such a seminal moment, right? And nobody wants to think that something that bad, that horrific, and that something that could sort of shatter the country in that fashion could be done by one guy like Lee Harvey Oswald
or John Hinckley. We saw that.